Welcome to the Man Fire Podcast, where we uncover the elements of strong, effective men. This is episode number 3, One Side of the Fence, a Lesson in Tradition. When I was in college, I had a friend named Alana. We met in an English class that we had together. And I remember one day opening the door for her before going into class, and she just stood there staring at the door, not quite sure what to do. And so I made a hand gesture for her to walk on through. And there was this look of surprise on her face that I was holding the door open for her. Apparently, this is not something that had happened to her very often. That was interesting because I'd never really experienced such a bit of surprise in holding the door open for anyone before. Anyways, we got to know each other more and more. She told me that she was an Orthodox Jew. And when the class ended for the term, we exchanged information, and I went to give her a hug, and she froze up and pulled back. And I apologized because I could tell, I'd upset her. And she said, no, it's not your fault. But apparently one of the rules in Orthodox Jewish culture is that she wasn't allowed to touch men that were outside of her family. I had never encountered this before, and it didn't change my friendship with her or my intrigue. It actually probably made me even more curious about what her life was like, and I think she was probably a bit curious about what my life was like. So over the years, even after we graduated college, we would get together for coffee once or twice a year, and we would talk about our two very different lives. She was a creative writer, and she shared some of her stories with me, and they were absolutely beautiful. Then the years passed on, and we drifted more and more out of touch. And then one day I got a call from her inviting me to come to her wedding. It had been years, I think, since we had talked, and I was so happy that she remembered me and that she reached out and that I'd be included in her wedding. So when her wedding came around, it was an Orthodox Jewish wedding. I was probably one of maybe 3 or 4 people there who were not Jewish. It was an interesting setting. I didn't feel completely at ease or like I belonged there because I didn't know the customs. I didn't know how men related to each other. There were a few people that I was introduced to, I think, kind of chaperone me through the evening, and I really appreciated that. But when the ceremony was over and the reception had been on for a little while, it came time for the dancing. And I've always been one to get up and dance at a wedding or going out to a club or wherever it might be. I enjoy dancing, and I think it's a great way to meet women. But at this wedding, they had put up a fence down the middle of the dance floor. They had decorated it with flowers and wreaths and all kinds of things. And essentially on one side of the fence, all of the women were dancing. On the other side of the fence, all of the men were dancing. And I didn't quite know what to do with this at first. This was something from another world for me. I'd never experienced any type of separation of the sexes like this before. And I thought, well, when in Rome, dance like the Romans. So I started dancing with the men there. And it was interesting because I'd never danced with only men. And the energetic connection was quite different than what I'm used to. And what I noticed was the groom was at the center of the dancing most of the time. We put him on a chair and lifted him up, and I was even one of the men holding one of the legs of the chair, lifting him up, spinning him in a circle, raising him up and down, and celebrating this moment in his life. I realized that by making it all men around him, it was polarizing the experience. This young groom, who, by the way, didn't really speak any English, I couldn't even talk to him. All he spoke was Hebrew. He was being rallied by all the men in the community around him. As he stepped into this new phase of his life, being married, most likely being a father, and of course didn't know much about what that meant, he knew that all the men in the community were there for him. That's what this dancing was. This dancing was telling him, we all have your back. And when it's only men around and we do something like that, it's reassuring in a way that can only happen when you've got one side of the fence that you're on. I know that a lot of these traditions have led to a lot of very toxic sexism, particularly to the detriment of women. But I guess what I wanted to share was that there are some elements of these traditions that are incredibly healthy and fortifying as well. And while we really do want to get rid of a lot of the junk that some of these traditions have brought about, we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Visit manfiremovement.com for more.